House will come to order. The clerk will open the voting system to determine the presence of a quorum.
Could be, who knows? There's something due any day. I will know right away, soon as it shows. It make 'em cannonballing down through the sky, gleaming its eye bright as a rose. Who knows? It's only just out of reach, down the block on a beach, under a tree. I got a feeling there's a miracle due, gonna come true, coming to me. Could it be? Yes, it could. Something's coming, something could. If I can wait, something's coming. I don't know what it is, but it is gonna be great. With a click, with a shock, phone'll jingle, door'll knock. Open the latch, something's coming, don't know when, but it's soon. Catch the moon, one-handed catch. Around the corner, or whistling down the river. Come on, deliver to me. Will it be? Yes, it will. Maybe just by holding still, it'll be there. Come on, something, come on in. Don't be shy, meet a guy, pull up a chair. The air is humming, and something great is coming. Who knows? It's only just out of reach, down the block on a beach. Maybe tonight, maybe tonight, maybe tonight.
Thank you, colleagues. Excused, Representative Reschke, Wallen, Harbeck, Kate, Wright, Yunker, Hua Huyen, and McIntyre. Excused business of the House, Smith, Hartman, Bowman, and Dobson. A quorum is present. Messages from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker, I'm directed by the President to inform you that the Senate has passed House Bills 2316, 2411, 2548, 2688, 3031, 3145, 3794, and concurred in House amendments and repassed Senate Bills 163, 230, 243, 690, 476, 844, and 1125.
Thank you for those messages. Having recessed under the order of business of propositions and motions, the House will continue under that order of business. I was hoping to get a motion from Representative Hartman, but I think she is currently excused. So I'm going to take a look at what comes next. The chair requests unanimous consent to suspend the rules to make Senate Bill 842 a special order of business immediately. Is there any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. The clerk will read the bill. 842, yes.
Senate Bill 842 relating to healthcare facilities prescribing an effective date.
The question now arises on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 842. Representative Noce.
Speaker, truly asking, I already covered the contents of this bill. Is this a bit of a redo?
And I'm sorry, I was distracted for a moment, Representative.
Okay, let's try again. I already gave the carry on the bill. Do I need to redo it?
I would say that's at your discretion.
Yeah. Okay, I'm feeling a sense of the body that everyone was listening not as well as they should have yesterday. So we're going to, maybe some people were. Whoa. Okay, I'll try to do an abbreviated carry, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. This is Senate Bill 842. It is an increase to licensing fees that are collected by the Oregon Health Authority from hospitals so that the health facility and licensing certification program, which is part of the Healthcare Regulation and Quality Improvement section within the Oregon Health Authority's Public Health Division, has the money that it needs to be able to do a good job of licensing and evaluating complaints that come in occasionally about hospitals and healthcare entities. These fees have not been increased since 2009. That's why we have this bill here before you. The number of complaints that the Health Authority has been receiving about hospitals has jumped from 177 in the year 2017 to 414 in the year 2023. That's a 130% increase. Candidly, colleagues, like this unit can't do the job that it is tasked to do without an increase in these fees. A hospital that is less than 26 beds will see its current fee of $1,250 annual go up to $5,000. And a hospital with 500 beds or more will see its annual fee go from $12,070 to $48,280, and there are a range of fees in between that for hospitals between 26 and 49 beds, 50 and 99, and 109. You get the idea. Colleagues, these fees are assessed so that an entity can do its job in terms of regulating hospitals and healthcare entities. If we didn't have these fees, we would be forced to spend general fund dollars on this. This is how we regulate and pay for regulation for a lot of entities in this state. I urge your yes vote on Senate Bill 842.
Thank you for that review, Representative. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Noce, do you wish to close? He does not. Those of the opinion the bill should pass, a vote aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk will open the voting system. Representative Krupp, your vote? votes aye. Representative Smith votes no. And Senate Bill 842, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Colleagues, we are still under propositions and motions. Representative Hartman, do you have a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House concur in the Senate amendments and repass House Bill 3525C.
Representative Hartman moves the House concur in the Senate amendments and repass House Bill 3525C. To your motion.
Thank you. Colleagues, this concurrence is a technical amendment that conflicts with a small fix in one word, adding the word quality into the groundwater management areas. So this bill conforms with changes made in Senate Bill 1154. I urge your support of this concurrence.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Hartman, you wish to close? She does not. Those are the opinion that the House should concur in the Senate amendments and repass House Bill 3525 will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Helfrich votes no. Representative Lewis votes no. House Bill 3525, having received the constitutional majority, is declared repassed. Colleagues, the chair requests unanimous consent to suspend the rules to make Senate Bill 824 a special order of business immediately. Is there any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 824 relating to health insurance.
The question now arises on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 824. Representative Valderrama, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. SB 824 requires health insurance carriers to include additional data in their annual report to the Department of Consumer and Business Services. The additional information includes, but is not limited to, the number of denials for health benefits, the percentage of payments for health benefits made to and out of network providers, and the median maximum reimbursement rate for each time-based office visit billing code. The measure is expected to have a minimal fiscal impact on the Department of Consumer and Business Services. Colleagues, I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Valderrama, do you wish to close? Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Walters, your vote? Excuse me, Representative Walters? Votes aye. Senate Bill 824, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Again, under propositions and motions, the chair requests unanimous consent to suspend the rules to temporarily advance to the order of business of second reading of Senate bills. Is there any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Second reading of Senate bills.
Senate Bill 1173 relating to product liability civil actions prescribing an effective date.
Bill read second time is passed to third reading. We're back under the order of business of propositions and motions. The chair requests unanimous consent to suspend the rules to read Senate Bill 1173 for the third time and to place it on today's third reading of Senate Bill's calendar. Is there any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. The chair requests unanimous consent to suspend the rules to consider Senate Bill 1173 as a special order of business immediately. Is there any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. The clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 1173 relating to product liability civil actions prescribing an effective date.
The question now arises on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 1173. Representative Javity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I appreciate the opportunity to bring this bill to you today for your consideration. I'm carrying Senate Bill 1173 today because we need to fix a misalignment in Oregon's law that creates creating unnecessary legal exposure for healthcare providers, of which I am one. Every day in Oregon, thousands of products, implants, catheters, medications, syringes, wound dressings are used in the course of care. Hospitals, clinics, and residential facilities don't design or manufacture these items. They use them as part of treatment, but under current law, those providers can now be treated as if they were sellers of those products simply because they stocked them on their shelves and charged for them. And under strict liability, once a product is found defective, that's the end of the inquiry. The provider can be held liable even if they provided excellent care and followed all the proper protocols. There's no need to prove negligence. There's no need to sue the manufacturer. That's not just legally backwards, it's economically dangerous. If we don't restore an exception for hospitals and clinics, similar to the one physicians have had since 2009, we're opening the door to higher costs and fewer independent physician-owned practices. The risk of strict liability will discourage providers from offering certain services or using certain tools, not because they aren't medically appropriate, but because the liability risk is too high. Senate Bill 1173 offers a straightforward fix. It says that if a provider wasn't involved in the design or manufacture of a product and they used it as part of medical care, the way it was intended to be used, they shouldn't be treated like a commercial seller under strict liability. That protection applies to hospitals, clinics, group practices, and residential care facilities. It makes clear that delivering care isn't the same as selling a product. Now, this bill has some guardrails. If a facility sells the products to the general public in a retail setting, they're still liable under existing product law. And more importantly, it does not take away an injured patient's right to sue. They can still bring a malpractice case. They can still sue the manufacturer. What this bill does is it prevents the misdirection of lawsuits at providers who had no role in making the product that caused the harm, nor were they aware that the product could cause the harm that it caused. Oregon is currently an outlier. It is the only state with a statute so narrow. Most states already protect their healthcare providers from strict liability in these scenarios. This bill brings us back in line with the standard. It reduces unnecessary litigation, helps stabilize insurance and compliance costs, and lets providers focus on what they were trained to do, care for patients, not defend against lawsuits for defective products they didn't create. I respectfully ask for your support.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion, Representative Mannix.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill?
To the bill.
I completely agree with everything the carrier of the bill has had to say, and I simply want to make sure everybody understands strict liability means you're liable no matter what. And that should only apply to someone who has actually manufactured or designed a product, not to someone who is simply using the product as presented in the course of medical practice. If we want to keep down the cost of medical services, this is a good bill to say yes to.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion, Representative Chaichi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill?
To the bill.
Colleagues, I will be a firm no on House Bill 1173. This chamber is being asked to overturn Oregon's statutory product liability law, which this legislature codified in 1979, and to completely disregard the Oregon Supreme Court's ruling in 2024, which affirmed that law. For those who are not fully aware, product liability law was intended to incentivize all of those in the chain of commerce to protect consumers from dangerous and defective products. The purpose behind the law is to spread the risk of loss caused by defective products away from the innocent consumer and to the entities in the chain of commerce for the defective product that profit from the sale of the product. This bill will make it harder for patients harmed by hospitals or clinics to receive justice. When we place additional legal protections around institutions rather than patients, we are allowing the balance of power to shift away from those who are most exposed, like families already navigating trauma, grief, or permanent injury. Hospitals are a foundational piece of all of our communities and where we all go when we are vulnerable. If we allow them to be shielded from accountability, it sends the message that institutional protection matters more than patient harm. It discourages people from coming forward even when negligence occurs. It also disincentivizes institutions from staying vigilant and improving safety practices because the threat of consequence is dulled. We have these laws in place because strict liability is intended to hold the chain of custody accountable when a product is dangerous or defective. It is a higher legal standard from negligence. Being able to name the seller, distributor, and manufacturer allows the court to determine the degree of liability each of those parties holds. It also allows the harmed consumer a remedy in situations where the manufacturer may be out of the country, like many pharmaceuticals, or where they may have gone out of business. An example would be being able to name Jiffy Lube in a suit for defective brake pads. They didn't manufacture them, but they chose that brand of brake pad and then sold it to you. Hospitals and other healthcare facilities make choices about which pharmaceuticals and devices they supply. They choose what kind of IV tubing, hip implantation devices, and medications they'll make available to patients. They also choose when to use those products, and then they mark up the cost of those materials to make a profit off of their patients/customers. This bill is opening the door to allow healthcare facilities to choose the cheaper, less reliable drugs and equipment without fear of being held accountable when those things are dangerous and defective. It shifts the accountability the facility has when having a bad drug or device to the patient. Patients typically don't have a choice or expertise in what is used when they go into a medical facility seeking care, whereas the healthcare facility has or should have the expertise and gets a profit. Accountability ensures they always make the best choices and, most importantly, are quick to pivot the moment they know otherwise. Patients also trust that hospitals are doing their due diligence. This law signals that is no longer a requirement. We're risking a lot with this legislation, and my worries also extend to the staff. Hospitals will be less likely to listen to nurses and patients when safety concerns are raised. Nurses are often the first to witness unsafe staffing levels, broken systems, or signs that a patient is at risk. Patients and their families know when something feels off, but if the institution knows that they have more protections from being held accountable, then it has less reason to take those warnings seriously. Accountability drives improvement. Silencing it leads to more harm. And colleagues, we must create policy that accounts for that. It is imperative that we make it easier for our frontline workers and patients to be heard, not harder. We need to be sending a clear message that Oregon values patient safety and transparency over institutional convenience. HB 1173 doesn't do that. I urge a nay vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion, Representative Tran.
Mr. Speaker, colleagues, to the bill.
The bill.
I am an eye care provider. I own clinics. And so if this bill passes, it will benefit me. But I need to remember that I will get sick, I will go to other clinics, and I will go to the hospital. So will my families and friends and community members and constituents. So as we think about who we're fighting for today, will I fight for my business? I have malpractice insurance, and I have other kind of insurance to cover, and I have the thoroughness of which I evaluate the products that I choose for my clinics and offer to my patients. Will I protect myself as a business owner, or will I protect those who may not be able to navigate the system to find the source that did them harm and could have killed them, all right? So I hope all of us think about who we are protecting when we are voting for these bills. I will be a no.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question to the carrier.
Question to the carrier. Does the carrier yield? He does.
To the carrier, if, for example, a newborn infant is injured by contaminated medication or defective equipment, if that equipment is administered in a hospital and the manufacturer goes out of business or is based in China, how will the family or the person killed or injured get justice if this bill passes?
Thank you for the question. That's a really fair question. And honestly, I hear you as a healthcare provider because, as we just heard from Representative Tran, that is our first concern, to do no harm. Sometimes the manufacturer is overseas, or they are out of business, or just out of reach. And when a patient is harmed and there's no clear path to compensation, that's a deeply frustrating place to be for the patient, for the provider, for everyone who's trying to do what's right for the patient. I think we should work on it. I'm open to conversations about better tools for injured patients, whether it's improving traceability of the product, or creating a compensation fund, or addressing gaps in enforcement against foreign manufacturers. But what I don't think we should do is shift the burden onto providers who are trying to do the right thing by their patient, who have used the product exactly the way that came with the instructions, have prescribed the medication just the way the package insert has, who really are trying to do no harm. And to the idea that a hospital is a chat GPT of healthcare and they can just look up and as a crystal ball know what's going on in there with each medication, with each product, what the potential harms are, I think we're giving hospitals just a bit too much credit there. I think to the extent that hospitals, clinics, providers are operating at the edge of the best knowledge that's available, I think we should respect that expertise and not shift the burden onto providers just because a lawsuit would be easier. If a hospital or clinic makes the mistakes, they're still fully liable under malpractice law. The bill doesn't change that. But if they're using a product in good faith, they shouldn't automatically step into the shoes of the manufacturer. So yes, there's a real issue here. And I appreciate the question. And I'd welcome follow-up conversations on how to solve that together.
Representative Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
So I heard the carrier, and what I heard was that perhaps thousands of Oregonians would be without justice if a manufacturer is located overseas or goes out of business. Mr. Speaker, when I normally take to the mic, I normally have prepared remarks in my hands that I read from. But I gotta tell you, I'm speaking to this bill today because the more I have dove into this bill, the more disturbed I am. I truly believe that if this bill passes, more Oregonians will be injured, more Oregonians will die, and I do not think that's what this body should endorse. If you have not read the written testimony that has been submitted, please take a moment to do so. I also think it's important to note why the Supreme Court, or a little bit of background about the Supreme Court case, Mr. Speaker. What happened with the case that led to the decision that the Supreme Court made was that a woman who was pregnant went to the hospital for help. And when she got to the hospital, they gave her a medication that left her baby with permanent heart injuries. Providence did not make that family whole. They fought that family. They fought them tooth and nail in the courts for years. And the Supreme Court gave that family justice. Now, I'm passionate about this because I became a nurse for the same reason that I became a lawmaker. Because I want to help people. Because I don't want people to die. I don't want people to be injured. And we should not pass this type of legislation, in my opinion. I haven't been a stronger no on any bill all season. Because I know what this will do to people. This will hurt Oregonians. I'm willing to work with the carrier. I'm willing to work with the advocates on finding a solution. But this bill in its current form is not the answer. It needs more work. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I vehemently am opposed and I encourage a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion. Representative Emerson Levy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Don't know if to the bill?
To the bill.
It's hard to go after that. And I really respect the passionate testimony from my colleague. And I think we all desire to serve people and serve people well. I think that's why we're all here. But every decision has a consequence. And I've only pulled the nerdy lawyer card a couple times, but I'm going to do it today. So strict liability means no matter what you do, the product is inherently defective. So your intent, your mental state, what you're thinking, it doesn't matter. It means you're negligent. And that's on the manufacturer. And we have that law because the manufacturer should be held responsible for creating a product that is safe. So what we're saying is that the hospital and the physician, they take a product and they use it, that they step into the shoes. And when we say step into the shoes, we mean they take on the liability, the insurance. They would be the first person to pay out on the claim. And if they're lucky, they can subrogate the manufacturer, which means that they could go after them after several lawsuits to try and recover their cost. It's very expensive. So what we're looking at is creating a standard of negligence that doesn't exist anywhere in the United States, which in turn will drive rates, it will drive cost, it will drive people out of the market. And when we drive cost, we risk there not being places in communities like mine and communities in rural Oregon that provide these specialty services, these surgeries, or the services that we need to keep the hospitals open. I absolutely believe that manufacturers should be held strictly liable, but the hospital should not be liable for the manufacturer. That is their job to create a safe product, and they are guaranteeing that that product is safe. And so, again, I did not create notes, I'm just going off the top of my head. We are creating a very dangerous precedent here to assume doctors to have, hospitals to have strict liability for a product they did not create. It would, again, be the first in the nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion. Representative Nose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
Colleagues, I find myself as the chair of the Behavioral Health and Healthcare Committee in the awkward position of having to decide which of my vice chairs I agree with, because they are both taking a passionate, different position on this bill. And I rise in support of the bill today, colleagues, and I'm sure that surprises some of you a little bit. Senate Bill 1173 is a fix to a misalignment in Oregon law that was created, that creates unnecessary legal exposure because of a court case. Now, every day in Oregon, thousands of products are used. Implants, catheters, medications, syringes, wound dressings, all right? Hospitals and clinics and residential facilities don't design these items. And I don't believe, candidly, that they're seeking to put defective products into use. This product, what happened with this situation, was the standard of care, okay? There is risk even when you engage in a medical procedure that is the standard of care that thousands of people have had a good outcome from. There is still occasionally risk that's involved. We don't always know if we're going to have an allergy or if something happens and you're opened up in surgery and something else occurs. This is not just legally backward, it's economically dangerous. 1173 offers a straightforward fix. It says that if a provider wasn't involved in the design or manufacture of a product and they use it as the best part of medical care and it wasn't reckless, It was a standard of care. They shouldn't be treated like a commercial seller under strict liability, as one of our colleagues just explained. The protection applies to hospitals, clinics, group practices, and residential care facilities. It makes clear that delivering care isn't the same as selling a product. The bill has guardrails, as was explained. If a facility sells products to the general public, it is a retail setting. They would be liable then in that instance. And more importantly, it does not take away an inpatient right to sue. If there was malpractice, they can sue. There wasn't malpractice in the case that brought this bill before us here today. It was the standard of care. We had a tragic outcome. Something went wrong. There's risk, colleagues, in procedure. It's unfortunate when bad things happen. But we live in a large world with lots of humans and lots of things going on. This is the right bill. Please vote yes on Senate Bill 1173.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Representative Scarlatos.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question to the carrier.
Question of the carrier. Does the carrier yield?
Yes.
He does.
So I don't know if I missed it or not, but it's my understanding that we're the only state in the entire country that doesn't have a law like this. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker. Yes. About May, when the Supreme Court decided on this case, we were not different than the rest of the country. But after the Supreme Court decision, we are the only state in the United States that subjects hospitals and clinics to strict product liability. So, yeah, to make that clear, yes, we are right now, currently, unless we change the law, the only state in the country that doesn't offer that same protection to hospitals and clinics.
Good enough for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion? Second time in the queue, Representative Mannix.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
I gave brief remarks at the beginning, but having heard more debate, I think I should make a couple of points. We're talking about really product liability, not liability for how you handled the product, not liability for you improperly using the product, but liability for the product itself. And you've already heard how, based on a recent Supreme Court decision, we are uniquely saying that hospitals and other healthcare providers will be liable for the product even though they did nothing wrong in applying the product. Now, if we want to talk about personal experience, my law firm rarely handles this kind of case, but we handled a series of cases for people who had knee implants put in, and the knee implants themselves were defective. And I was proud to represent those plaintiffs against the producers of the product. But we made it clear that we were not going to, some people say, oh, you should sue the hospital, sue the nurses, sue the doctors. No, they had nothing to do with the product other than using it as directed. And we were successful in getting recovery against the manufacturer. In fact, the manufacturer finally agreed that they had produced an improper product, and they and their insurer paid up. The system can work. Now, I heard it, and by the way, we want to personalize this. My wife is a registered nurse. She has been for 50 years, and as I speak, she's on duty at Salem Hospital. So believe me, for 50 years, I've gotten feedback about the medical community and everything else. And I've never heard her talk about the hospital or anyone else being screwed up about products. Instead, it's the products themselves that are sometimes a concern. But let's circle back to this argument about a Chinese manufacturer who has sent a defective product to the United States and then it goes bankrupt. Well, wait a minute. There are a series of entities that will be responsible in that cycle. How about the importer? How about the distributor? How about the insurance company they probably had? How about the insurer for that Chinese company? There are many layers of coverage for an improper product. But the one layer of coverage we shouldn't have is to say to a hospital, well, you did everything right with this device, but now it's been found out that there is something wrong with that product. so we're going to hold you liable for it. And what does that mean? We mean a tremendous growth in insurance coverage for our healthcare institutions, which imposes more costs on the system. And there is a recovery process available, which I've just described. And in America, by the way, it's those layers of protection that are proper, and they're used in every state. But we've created this artificial other piece of obligation, which is harmful to our healthcare providers. And this bill provides a solution which puts us on the same playing field as 49 other states. So I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative. Second time in the queue, Representative Tran.
I was recommended to rise to declare a potential conflict of interest. Even though I belong to a larger group of healthcare provider, I operate a medical clinic and could benefit from this legislation. However, as I mentioned before, I'm a no on this bill.
Thank you, Representative. In compliance with House Rule 3.21 sub 2, please file your conflict in writing with the Chief Clerk by 5 p.m. tomorrow. Further discussion, Representative Choatson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
I agree with a lot of the discussion that's gone on so far. And there are times when a product is bad and someone gets hurt. And the hospital and the medical provider has done absolutely nothing wrong. And the patient has also done absolutely nothing wrong. So the way I approach problems like this as a policymaker is when we have these situations, and as Representative Mannix and Representative Levy and others have described, right, there's a series of other entities already that might be liable. And as the law currently stands, if a hospital is found to be liable for this, they can go after those other entities themselves. And if we were to change this law, or regardless of whether or not we change this law, currently the patient can go after those other entities. But there are times where those other entities, right, the manufacturer, the importer, things like that, they're bankrupt, they're out of the country, they're not reachable legally for one reason or another. And something has gone terribly wrong. And someone is going to end up with that financial harm. Someone's going to end up on the short end of the straw. So the way I look at these problems as a policy is I ask two questions. I ask, who has the greater ability to pay? Who has deeper pockets? Who has a greater ability to pool the risk and look at, a large number of categories, and so they can figure out 1 out of 1,000 is going to go wrong, but how do we spread that more evenly around if it's just simply bad luck? Who's more likely to have insurance that would cover this type of thing? And then the second question I ask is, who has more knowledge to prevent this type of thing from happening in the future? If we stick this liability with one group or another, who is going to be able to have a better chance to prevent this from going wrong in the future? I completely agree that our hospitals and our healthcare providers are completely well-intentioned, and they most of the time cannot see this coming. But in choosing between the patient or the healthcare provider, I do think the healthcare provider has more knowledge and more expertise about the products they choose. And in choosing who has the greater ability to pay, how do we pool the risk? Our entire insurance industry is based on the concept that we pool risk. I do think that when something goes terribly wrong, and the healthcare provider has done nothing wrong, and the patient has also done nothing wrong, and we have a terribly tough decision to make, that the healthcare provider has the greater ability to pay and has greater knowledge to prevent this type of thing from happening. So for that reason, I think the Supreme Court got this right as a matter of policy, and I will be a no on this vote today. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion, first time in the queue, Representative Gamba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question to Representative Nelson.
Representative Gamba has a question for Representative Nelson. Representative Nelson, do you yield?
I do.
He does.
Representative Nelson, are there situations in which hospitals or clinics have a choice between products that will do essentially the same thing, and ever do they choose the cheaper product?
Thank you, Representative. I have been around hospitals for 20 years, and I can say with certainty there are times when hospitals are mindful of how they are spending their dollars, and they choose a product that is less expensive than perhaps a better product.
Mr. Speaker, to the bill.
To the bill.
Colleagues, questions like this arise because we have a healthcare system designed to create profit for a variety of entities as opposed to a healthcare system that is designed and focused on providing the best possible healthcare to the patients. It is the single most expensive healthcare system on the planet, and it has some of the worst outcomes of any healthcare system in the top 12 nations on this planet. Decisions are made based on cutting costs, and those are the kinds of decisions that this legal question can possibly come down to. Could the hospital have chosen the better product? Could the decision that was made to choose the cheaper, and since we're picking on China today, Chinese product that then goes out of business because it was creating a bad product. And now we have some poor family who is left with no recourse because no one's responsible. Colleagues, I will be an absolute no on this bill.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion, Representative Haifam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Out of abundance of caution, I declare potential conflict of interest. I have hospital privileges at 3 major hospitals, and I own dental clinics. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And as you know, in compliance with House Rule 3.21 Sub 2, please file your conflict with the Chief Clerk's office by 5 p.m. tomorrow. Further discussion, again, second time in the queue, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
I don't know if there are many people in this room who've watched or been there when more people have died than I have. I have watched over the course of my career, well, there's one. But over the course of my career, I've been there when dozens of people have taken their final breath. And I am certain that if this bill passes, people will be injured or will die unnecessarily. I believe that we will be providing an incentive for hospitals to use cheaper and more inferior equipment if we pass this bill as is. Now, I think I could get there if this bill just applied to clinics. But hospitals have emergency rooms, they have cardiovascular ICUs, they have a much more acute patient population. And Mr. Speaker, we need to get this right rather than doing it now. Again, I am willing to work with the advocates to find a solution that ensures that Oregonians get justice, that ensures that they are cared for well, and a solution that actually works. I do not understand why we are rushing this. This bill, I thought yesterday this bill was dead, and it came back alive this morning in Rules Committee, and now it's on the floor. Why are we rushing at the last minute to get this out? Let's take some time in the interim to work on this, and I would be happy to be a co-chief sponsor in the interim on legislation that does what the advocates want if we can just work together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Is there further discussion? Representative Deal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
You know, I think this bill just makes just makes sense. And I have a lot of empathy for the situation that the representative from the Portland area, I forget his exact region, is talking about. But as someone who was in business who integrated products, to think that I would have to be liable for everything the suppliers did to make their product doesn't make any sense to me. I'm responsible for how I implement that and design my system around it. But what happens in this case, and I've actually personally experienced this, if you're involved in a project and somebody else does something wrong, I can be dragged into that suit because I have an ability to pay, even though I have had nothing to do with that element that went wrong on that project. And I don't think that's right. What happens is both entities have to buy insurance for that case. And in the case we're talking about, the hospital has to buy insurance to cover that, and the manufacturer. So consumers pay for that ultimately. So consumers are paying twice for the coverage. This makes sense. Let the liability lie where the responsibility for the design and development came from for that product. So I urge a yes vote on this.
Thank you, Representative. Again, further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Javity, you wish to close?
Yes. Colleagues, thank you for the robust discussion, and I want to let everyone know who's opposed. I hear you, and I want to just for a minute touch on a couple things before we're done here. The case that was mentioned that led to where we are today is a case called Providence v. Brown. The Oregon Supreme Court ruled that a hospital can be considered a seller under the state's strict product liability law. We heard this. If it supplies and charges for a defective product. The case background, as we heard, a pregnant woman was treated at Providence Hospital and was given Zofran, a prescription drug for nausea, given millions and millions of times. Zofran was administered by hospital staff, dispensed through the Providence's internal pharmacy. The child was later born with severe congenital heart defects, and the parents sued both the drug manufacturer and Providence. Think about that. They sued the hospital because Providence handed a medication that had been used millions of times to a patient that had been vetted to be safe and effective, and in this case, turned out not to be. And if you look at any drug insert, you will see a whole list of side effects. Why was Providence sued? GlaxoSmithKline was the manufacturer. Guess what? They're still in business. They still operate. They're based in England. They could have gone after. They went after that when I talked with OTLA about this, because when you're in the, I'm outside my lane here, but when you're in the business of the legal profession, you try to attach everybody you can to a lawsuit to get money. And then you leave it up to the process to determine who's not going to be liable. The problem is, if I'm sued or if you're sued, I still have to pay an attorney, still go through the process. It takes me away from the normal actions of what I do simply because I gave a medication to a patient that I had on hand. Providence's argument was they claimed that they are not a seller, but a healthcare provider. They argued the hospital shouldn't be exempt from strict product liability. They should be exempt from strict product liability unless they act like a retailer. The court's reasoning was simply this. The court applied a textualist approach, which, from all my traveling back and forth to Tillamook, I've learned from listening to the Supreme Court means they're actually just reading the word, and the word means this, it means this. So the plain meaning of the statute is how they interpreted it. They concluded that a hospital supplies, when a hospital supplies a drug and charges for it, they are now considered a seller of the drug, simply because they charged for the drug. If providing products is part of a hospital's regular business activity, that qualifies them as being engaged in the business of selling. The court emphasized in their opinion that if the legislature wants to exempt hospitals, they should. But because they're constrained by the textualist approach that they were applying to the court case, they had to rule against Providence. So that brings us to this legislation. We want to change that. I'm asking, and the advocates are asking, for an exemption for hospitals. We've all seen the headlines, and we've heard about them. Medical errors are a serious issue, and they should be. But let's not confuse a flawed product with a failed provider. The opposition says we need more accountability in healthcare. I agree. But accountability only works when it's aimed at the right target. If we aim at the wrong targets, we're going to disincentivize good behavior. We're going to raise the costs of providing health care. We're going to limit the options available. This bill doesn't remove anyone's ability to sue a provider for negligence. If a hospital cuts a corner, they knowingly are using a bad product, a bad IV, a drug that they've seen bad stuff happen with, and they continue to use it, that's malpractice. It's already covered. If a clinician makes a mistake, that's malpractice. But that's not what this bill is about. This is about a provider who uses a product, maybe a pacemaker, maybe a hip implant, maybe a knee implant, maybe a medication, and then that product turns out to be defective, to be a dud. Not because of anything the provider did, but because of a design flaw or a problem in manufacturing. And suddenly, the clinic's on the hook. Not because they did anything wrong, but because they happened to hand it to the patient. That's not accountability, that's just misdirected liability. It's like blaming a bus driver when a brake pad fails, or suing the grocery store cashier because the spinach bag you bought had E. coli. You wouldn't hold your car mechanic liable if a brand new tire blew out because of a factory defect. You'd go after the tire company because that's who made the thing that failed. That's what this bill does. It says in healthcare liability for a defective product belongs with the people who made it, not the people who used it in good faith to care for patients. If you come see me at my office and you've just lost a tooth, you may, of all the options, want a dental implant. I am going to go to the manufacturer. There are dozens out there. I'm going to find the dental implant I think works best for you. Those dental implant manufacturers have all been vetted. They're going to send me the dental implant. I'm going to put it into your jawbone. And if I do that correctly and I don't cut any corners, you're going to have a tooth. If something goes wrong down the road, I personally am going to be protected. Now, what if I take that dental implant, it falls out of the package on the ground, rolls around in the dust and the dirt, I pick it up, give it to my dental assistant, she licks it clean, then we take it and we put it into your jawbone. Well, we just did some malpractice, right? That is negligent. Whatever happens next, I am completely on the hook for. No amount of shielding is going to keep me safe. That's not what this is about. Providers and hospitals are using it correctly. Now here's the rub. I own my dental practice. If I use a product, I use it correctly, and something goes wrong, guess what? I can't be sued, but here's the wonderful loophole. I actually still can be sued because I own the clinic. So now my clinic can get sued even though I can't get sued, which is really just the same thing. That's what this loophole now creates. That's what we're trying to close. If the clinic knows, if I know that that dental implant's been on the ground, licked, and now it's inserted back into your jawbone, I'm in big trouble, and so are you. But that is not what this is about. So we need to make a clarification. We need to continue to discourage, we don't want to continue to discourage independent and physician-led practices from taking on risk. It's just going to inflate legal costs across the board, costs that ultimately get passed on to patients. We can be serious about patient safety without rewriting the rules of basic fairness. I've got a couple of minutes left. I just want to address a couple of more concerns. We talked about cheap products. Guess what? We're a business. There's thousands of different ways to, when I put a filling in your mouth, there's not just one filling on the planet material, there's lots. I am probably going to choose the one that does the best job, and there's going to be a lot in that range. I'm also going to choose the one that costs the least of the good ones so that I can make the business work. I'm not picking the cheapest one because I'm a shill. I don't want to, I want to give you the best thing there is. I'm also not picking the most expensive one because I got to keep healthcare affordable. If we start incentivizing only pick the expensive products, because if you pick the cheap one, we may hang this around, hang this on you as a failure of your duty to the patient. Well, guess what? We're just all going to start picking the most expensive products we can find. Or we're going to incentivize cheap manufacturers to label their product with the highest price possible, because now that communicates to everybody that high price means high quality. We don't want to do that either. Another thing, too, and the last thing I'll finish on is confidence. If you're a paramedic and somebody's dying, do you really want the paramedic thinking right before they grab that product that's going to save your life, I wonder if I use this and something goes wrong, I'm going to get sued? Do you want the ER physician who's about to cut you open, to save your life, to think, I wonder if I should use that scalpel. Did we pay enough for that scalpel? Or if they're going to insert that IV, is this IV going to be the one that, who can tell me that we vetted this appropriately? You have to trust that it's been done right, and then you have to prove if it hasn't been done right, that there's a case there, that you can sue. And nobody's stopping you from doing that. If you knowingly are using bad IV because it's been reported, bad IV tubing, bad saline, bad surgical blades, you name it, fine, sue. Show that there was negligence, that there wasn't a duty to care, that you didn't, you ignored repeated complaints that led to this moment. I'm fine with that. But in the case where there's no connection to wrongdoing, you simply handed the patient a prescription or some drugs and said, this will work for you, I don't think the hospital should be on the hook. And we would be the only state in the country that does think the hospital should be on the hook. And so that's what this legislation's about. Now, if this legislation fails, and it won't, I have faith, but if it does, I will come back and work with the opposition to figure out how we can tighten it up. But colleagues, we shouldn't need to do that. This is plain, straightforward, good policy. Nobody's trying to risk anybody's life here. I trust the providers and the clinics that we've empowered to give us care. I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you all for the conversation this afternoon. Those of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will open the voting system. Representative Sanchez votes aye. Representative Ruiz votes aye. Representative McLean votes aye. Representative Graber votes no. Representative Fragola votes aye. Senate Bill 1173, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Colleagues, I understand that there is some anticipation that we actually may be able to conclude our business today, or perhaps I should say tonight. I'm going to take a recess motion in just a couple of moments, but first I want to ask if there are any announcements. Representative Bowman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that the rules be suspended and that Representative Lewis be allowed to change his vote on House Bill 2005. It will not change the outcome.
Representative Bowman requests unanimous consent that Representative Lewis be allowed to change his vote on House Bill 2005. It will not change the outcome. Is there any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Representative Lewis, your vote? Votes no. Other announcements, Representative Bowman?
Yes, one more. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues in the House Democratic Caucus, we will have a caucus meeting immediately following floor. Please head to hearing room E. Thank you.
I will also announce that the House Rules Committee will meet at 3:45 p.m. Do we know the room number? They'll figure out what room. House Rules at 3:45. Representative Smith, may we have a recess motion, please? Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Representative Elmer, I did not see you. I apologize.
Sneaky, it's okay. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I request that we suspend the rules and allow Representative Ruiz to change his vote on House Bill 3984. It will not change the outcome.
What was the number again, please?
3984.
3984. Very good. Representative Elmer requests unanimous consent that Representative Ruiz be able to change his vote on House Bill 3894. 39. What are these bills? It will not change the outcome. Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Representative Ruiz, your vote, please. Votes no. Other announcements? All right, Representative Smith, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Speaker, colleagues, I move the House stand in recess until 6 p.m. this evening.
Representative Smith moves the House stand in recess until 6 p.m. tonight, June 27, 2025, and without objection, the House is in recess.